When it comes to video, color grading is one of the most important ways you can add your visual signature to the footage that you film. To get the most out of your camera, you might choose something like shooting in log to give you more dynamic range. In the case of the brand new Fujifilm X-H2S, that means using F-Log or F-Log2. And the main difference between these two log curves is one will give you more dynamic range at the cost of some noise, and the other gives you a little bit less dynamic range but has lower noise. Now what we're going to do today is look at some of the different methods of conforming that log footage. When a manufacturer makes a camera, they come up with some recommended methods of getting the most dynamic range they can out of that sensor without using a raw file format. So log is designed to give you as much information as possible in a single frame of video. So in the scene you're seeing here, this bright area behind me is captured as well as this dark area behind me as well. The application for your footage can be wide. Somebody could be viewing this on a tablet, an iPhone, they could be viewing on a computer. To try and make sure this is viewable by the widest range of people, you probably want to use a standard format. And by far and away, the most common format for any kind of high definition content is called Rec. 709. Rec. 709 was the standard broadcast color space for HD television in the United States. And it's quite frankly the most widely adopted format for color worldwide. So when you are looking to present your video, unless you know specifically that it needs to be made in a different format, converting to Rec. 709 from log means that that footage is going to be viewed by the most people possible. So let's take a look at log footage and we'll see what it actually looks like. So if you turn with me to Final Cut Pro, we'll take a look at the footage now. So this is a clip of my friend Sam. I'm going to link to his Instagram in the description below. He's a photographer and generally a nice guy and really good to chat to, especially about coffee. He's really knowledgeable and used to run a coffee shop. So we're going to have a look now at this footage as it came out the camera. This is my final deliverable. And this is what log footage looks like without any assistance. And I think we can all agree, you probably wouldn't want to watch this for any significant amount of time. It's super bland, there's absolutely no skin tone, and the entire scene just looks flat. So what we're going to do now is re-enable my corrections, and we're going to have a look at how we get from this to this. Okay, so we're going to start out from the very beginning of the process, as if there was absolutely no corrections on this footage. Now the first thing you're going to need to do is come down here to your effects panel and then go to the search box and type custom, and then as you can see custom LUT has popped up. You grab this correction and you drop it on your footage, and that will give you this little drop down here which says custom LUT. Now by default it's going to say none. And this means that you don't currently have any log conversion applied to your footage or otherwise. So go to this drop down, go to Fujifilm, choose Eterna BT709 33 grid V1. Personally, I don't think this is good enough, but if you were in a pinch, you could just apply this to everything and you would have at least viewable footage, if not something that you could be proud of. So how do we take this to our final result, which looks like this? Well, quite frankly, we need to add some other changes. Final Cut Pro works from top to bottom. So any adjustments that happen here will happen before ones that happen below it. So Color Wheels 1 happens before Custom LUT, and then after Custom LUT, Color Wheels 2 is applied. So what we're going to do here is have a look at the changes that we've made. If we go into our color wheels, you can see that I've raised the shadows slightly in the first color wheels to give me more shadow detail. I've dropped the highlights to retain more of that highlight information, and I've lowered the midtones to keep some contrast in Sam's skin. Aside from that, there aren't really any other changes here. You can see there's no color temperature changes. They look great out of camera, and there are no other exposure adjustments. Now, the next step in this chain would be the custom LUT, which is the one provided by Fujifilm. And then afterwards, there's a mastering step where we add some additional contrast. So with just those base adjustments and then the Fujifilm LUT, we get this as a result, which is relatively low contrast. So what we're doing now is putting that contrast back, adding some more saturation in, and making sure we keep lots of information in these highlights without ruining the skin tones in the image. So it's a slight reduction in the kind of levels in the shadows to add more contrast to the shadows, a little bit less saturation. And the midtones have got a bit more saturation to kind of liven up Sam's skin a little bit. But aside from that, again, there aren't many adjustments. So again, before this final step and after, that's a much more pleasing result to me. And I would be more than happy to provide this to a client. And again, this is our first method, which is the Fujifilm Eterna LUT to convert from F-Log2 to Rec 709, and then some custom mastering changes that would be different for every image you shoot. Our second method is going to be applying a custom LUT after the base correction. So in this case, we have the custom LUT from Goodlight. Now, they are a preset company that use profiles in Lightroom, and this LUT is designed to match their M6 profile in Lightroom. And for me, that's great because it means if I'm working stills and video on the same project, I can have a somewhat cohesive look between the two sets of deliverables. So again, we've got the same adjustments as the first: color wheels, custom LUT, and that's going to do our transforms. That's our F-Log2, F-Gamut to Eterna BT709. And then we have color wheels 2 just afterwards. This is the mastering step. And then finally, we have Goodlight M6 applied at 80% to give us our final step. So without Goodlight M6, it looks like this. Again, exactly the same as the previous example. And with it, it looks like this. It's added more contrast to the shadows, a little bit more punch to the highlights, more color in the skin, more color in the shadows. You can see there's a nice green cast that's been introduced, which I personally really like. And this, to me, is a pretty pleasing result. Left to my own devices, this is probably how I would choose to grade this footage. It gives me all the control of a manual conversion, but it gives me some of the color and interest from a more kind of creative look afterwards. This next option we have, option 3, is to do an all-in-one conversion. Now, I'm going to look at this in 2 different methods because there are 2 ways of doing it. Now, this is a LUT from a company called LUT.co. Now, I got this from Moment. Again, link in the description if you want to check this one out. And this is super simple. So again, we go back to our basic setup: color wheels 1, custom LUT, and then color wheels 2. But you'll notice that this time it isn't that Fujifilm LUT. It's this LUT.co LUT. And if you go through, there's a bunch of different options here. And some of these are more designed to kind of just be a normal conversion in the same way as the Fujifilm LUTs would be. But the one we've looked at here is Creative Kodak Gold V1. I experimented with all these. This is the one I preferred, so we're going to have a look at this one first. And you can probably see that without any particular work here, we've just done the basic conversions, just that really normal, simple conversion. It actually looks pretty close to Goodlight M6. Now, I would argue that Goodlight looks better to my eye, but you might find that this is more than enough. And where our basic Eterna LUT doesn't have an awful lot of visual interest, this does. This has kind of a little bit more of those kind of elements that you might want in your project, and you don't have to do anything extra to get there. So this is a really good budget option. I do recommend these LUT.co LUTs. They are fantastic. I would still prefer to use the Fujifilm LUTs if you're doing just a basic conversion. But if you want something more creative, this particular F-Log2 to Kodak Gold LUT that they've got in this pack is actually really good. And it's a really simple starting point to getting started with color grading F-Log2. There are a couple of other ways of doing something similar though. So we're going to have a look now at Dehancer Pro. Now, Dehancer is, frankly, very, very powerful, and it does an awful lot, and it can be a little bit overfacing to start with, but in a nutshell, it's doing what the kind of LUT.co LUT was doing. It's taking your footage from completely unpolished to a final result in one step if you decide to use it that way. So in this case, we're going to pretend that that's what we want to do. We're going to start with nothing, use Dehancer, and go from there. So again, exactly the same process: color wheels 1, custom LUT, and then color wheels 2. So you can see on the right hand side, that's vaguely the structure we have here. We've got color wheels 1, Dehancer Pro, and then color wheels 2. Now, Dehancer Pro is a plugin. So as you can see, there's an awful lot going on here. This menu goes on and on and on. But I want to kind of take some of the fear out of this. You don't have to use every element of this to do a log conversion. This first section here, the input, is where the log conversion is happening. So you would choose your camera. So in this case, it's a Fujifilm X-H2S and the F-Log2 profile. That's the gamma curve that we had in camera. And then you can make any other adjustments to your exposure here. You can then choose a creative LUT afterwards. So where previously we chose Goodlight M6, which is emulating Portra 800, in this program we've chosen a Kodak Portra 400 look, and we tried to match it a little bit by kind of reducing the exposure in camera so it's underexposed one stop. And you can see here we've got the technical conversion, the creative LUT, all in one place. So if you just needed to do a technical conversion with a little bit creative LUT, this would be the result that Dehancer could give you pretty quickly. Now, we've also made some additional adjustments in terms of like some of the extra tools in here, because one of the amazing things about Dehancer is it actually emulates more than just a log conversion. It emulates the process of printing to a film stock to be then displayed through a projection. So again, it's a really powerful tool. So although it's possible to only use this for the log conversion, personally I actually think its strengths are in other areas. So this expansion area does a really good job of kind of raising shadows and kind of adding a bit more punch to highlights. You can go for this print emulation where you can add some amazing stuff using color density. So if we reset this, I just want to show you what it looks like. Pay attention to Sam's skin in the chairs. Look at the amount of additional saturation that's added when we put that color density in at 100. It really makes a lot of the color tones in the image pop. The analog range limiter is really useful if you're trying to kind of keep contrast in your image, but you don't want there to be like tons of inky blacks in the image. It kind of raises them a little bit to give you a bit more information in those shadows. And again, it does it in an organic way. There's lots of different ways of doing this, but the way that Dehancer goes about that is pretty impressive, to be honest. The color heads are another kind of more traditional print process. I'm not going to go into too much information here, but what I'll say is that playing through this can help you to kind of do a lot of work to make your colors look really impressive. The film grain is disabled for me, mainly because most of my videos published online, and if you publish online video, grain can be detrimental, let's say. It can kind of mess with a lot of the compression algorithms on things like YouTube or Instagram, and it can end up making your video look really soft because it's kind of tried to smooth out what it sees as digital noise, when actually that was an artistic choice. It was grain that you've added on purpose. The next section is one of the most powerful tools inside of Dehancer for me. This is the halation and bloom tools. We'll cover them in a little bit more detail a little bit later on in the video, but I just wanted to make it clear that this is something special. And actually, even if you never touch any of the other elements of this tool, this alone is worth the price of entry to me. So Dehancer Pro isn't the only option out there. And for me personally, I actually used to use another plugin called Film Convert Nitrate. Now, this is a fantastic solution and works very similarly to the way that Dehancer works. You can see on the right hand side here, we have Film Convert Nitrate. You hit Open Controls and you're welcome with this panel here. Now, in the future, this is likely to work a little bit differently, but right now, this does not work properly with my primary camera of choice, the Fujifilm X-H2S. So normally you would select your camera from these drop downs. Previously I shot Canon, so I'd choose Canon. And then you would go down to choose your particular camera body. It was an R5 and R6, so I'd choose R6. And then you would choose the log gamma that you shot in. And for me, typically that was, it was some kind of log format, so it's usually C-Log3, Rec 709 color. And this would do the conversion for you. Now the problem is, at the moment, there are no profiles for the Fujifilm cameras that we're looking at today. So if we look at the Fujifilm, the only options are XT2, XT3 and XT4, and all three of those cameras shoot with the normal F-Log and not F-Log2. So for our purposes, we can't do the log conversion with Film Convert Nitrate. But to try and emulate what that result is likely to look like when they sort that out, we've just added Fujifilm's LUT first, and then we've added Film Convert Nitrate afterwards. As with Dehancer Pro, this is emulating Kodak Portra 400, even though they've abbreviated it in a strange way. And we've turned the grain off exactly the same as with the Dehancer Pro. And we did have to do a little bit of additional correction here. There's some shadow contrast been added, a little bit of kind of like darkness added into the shadows. And you can see that this does quite a lot to reduce the overall brightness of the highlights. You can see that it's kind of well below the top of this histogram here. But this is another option. And actually, up until the point of discovering Dehancer, this was my primary method of converting log footage. If I was shooting with the Canon R6 and I had a quick turnaround, I could just quickly set this up to kind of convert, and it would give me a really good starting point with a bit of creativity on it. But genuinely, with the Fujifilm, I think that we have so many different choices. It really is a matter of preference. If we have a look through our 5 options here, you can decide what you prefer. We have the Fujifilm Eternal LUT. We have Goodlight M6. with the Fuji Eternal LUT as the conversion underneath it. We have the all-in-one solution of LUTCO, giving us that F-Log2 to Kodak Gold look. Again, this is a really nice solution if you don't want to do much work. Film Convert Nitrate, which right now is a little bit more of a headache, but soon can be fixed. This is the Eternal LUT and then Film Convert on top. And then Dehancer Pro, which is an all-in-one solution with a bunch of additional powerful tools. Now let's have a look at it in some other situations, because these adjustments aren't going to apply evenly across all scenarios. I want you to have a look at these examples and tell me, which of these do you prefer? Like, which of these adjustments looks best to you in the widest range of situations? If you need to, feel free to stop the video and replay it so you can have a look and decide what you prefer. But again, for me personally, I know what I like. And in a second, we're going to talk about how I personally mix and match these tools to get a result that I think gives you the best marriage of quality, performance, and speed. So to sum up, we've got three different methods here. You have Fujifilm's LUT as the be-all end-all. You have using that conversion LUT as a basis for your own adjustments and using other LUTs on top. You have plugins that allow you to make really powerful and heavy changes, and you've got all-in-one solutions. For me personally, I prefer the control that comes from using the Fujifilm LUT first, adding my own creative LUT on top, and then finally using some of those additional advanced tools from Dehancer to add the final touches to the images. Okay, so let's talk about halation in a little bit more detail. This is an effect that used to happen a lot in motion picture film, especially in the earlier days. Like modern cameras saw this less, but essentially what would happen is you'd be shooting your film, light would come in through the lens into the back of the film canister, and then the film canister casings were painted to be black. But in some cases, that black paint was not quite sufficient to give you a completely clean result. So what would happen is light would hit the back of the film canister and reflect back into the far end of the emulsion. So what you would get was this kind of redness that came from the red layer on the back of the film. So if you look at Sam's skin in this situation, watch what happens when we turn the halation on. Can you see it introduces that rosy pinkish tone back into the skin that was previously lacking? So if we take it off and put it back on again, this is from that bleed that happens from the halation. That red layer in the image is being more uniformly exposed, which adds a bunch of pink, magenta, warm tones to skin. And I don't know about you, but I kind of like my skin looking warm. So if you look at Sam's skin, you can see that texture is significantly smooth when we turn this on. Now, this is also in conjunction with something else called bloom, which is where a light source kind of expands into areas that it doesn't belong. And again, this is a really common film artifact. If we turn this on, you can see that it's kind of gently softening these highlight areas. It's kind of normalizing some of the tones inside of Sam's shirt. And overall, you can see that it's just generally warming the image. And especially with these point sources at the back, it makes them look a little bit less aggressive by just adding like a bit of a soft haze to the image and kind of the way it looks. Why am I talking about this section separately? You can mix and match. So in my experience, these methods are all down to personal taste. I'm going to play another clip for you now. And in this clip, we're mixing and matching. This is the Fujifilm Eternal LUT with our basic adjustments. It's the Goodlight M6 LUT at 80%. And on top of that, we have the bloom, halation, and some of the print emulation that comes from Dehancer. And as you can see, the skin tones are warm, there's detail in the shadows, the highlights are attractive without clipping, there's a nice bloom and a softness to it. We've moved to a second situation here. This one's indoors under tungsten light. This one's at window light to give us a colder color temperature. It's overcast on the day as well, so it's got a little bit less. And you can see just how pleasant this footage looks. So having seen all the footage, how do you prefer to work? Do you want to keep things simple with the Fujifilm Eternal LUT? Do you want to add a bit of creative flair by adding your own creative LUTs on top or using an all-in-one solution? Or do you want to go for something truly special, mix and match these things, and add some amazing effects from plugins like Dehancer? However you choose to adjust your footage, remember that color grading is a personal choice. The objective here is to know your tools well enough to know how to get the result that you want from the footage that you've produced. If you'd like to see more content like this, feel free to subscribe and hit the like button. and hopefully I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.